Hello and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Ibi Ibrahim. I am here with Makan Press. We are a photo book publisher that focuses on the work of immigrant artists and those from war and conflict zones. We're here at G10. Today, I want to talk about our debut title, Photography from Yemen. But in a way, it's more than just that. I will maybe take you on a journey on contemporary art practices from Yemen with a focus on photography. But before I get to this stage, I kind of want us to go back some years ago. My background is in fine art. I've been a photographer artist for the past 15 years. And when the war erupted in Yemen over 10 years ago, I happened to have just finished an art residency in Berlin. And there's this notion that when you come from a place like Yemen, a very underdeveloped country, you feel this, don't know if it's an obligation or a state of mind where you have to do something. You can't just watch the news without contributing to relaying a message or talking about what is happening. So this idea of I've been an art practitioner, an art administrator when it comes to contemporary art practices from Yemen for over a decade now, but it was nothing that I went to study or was interning or doing fellowships to get better at. It just happened because there was a space and there was a need and something needed to be done. If you're on your phone, I would advise you to open your Instagram and check this IG handle. This is how things started, at least for me, when the war erupted. It was about what can we do to create awareness about the work that artists are creating inside Yemen, but also those who are living in the diaspora in the time of war. Because what happened is media would cover Yemen from only one angle. It was a war zone and there was nothing else. And my family who was living there, through them I was seeing something else. Yes, the war was there and it was at its worst, but there was something else that was happening. Artists continued to make work, they continued producing, they continued to live their daily struggle. And that's how things started, at least for me. It was just the easiest and most affordable way to launch this Instagram account and kind of feature any activity that an artist is doing, and regardless of what the medium was, and try to share it and create this different idea of there is a war, but there is more than that, and those artists need our support. You can sense this notion of those artists living outside in the diaspora, they're longing for Yemen, and those who are inside in their work, they reflect on the challenges and the hardship of producing and making art in the times of war. And at this time, I remained in Berlin, and as someone who has traveled a lot, used to be based in Yemen, and would travel for one art residency after another, I thought, what would be something that would be helpful for artists living in war zones? So one of the first projects we made is create this art residency program where we invite artists living inside Yemen to come to Berlin, Germany for 1 month. And to produce, to be in a different environment, to be influenced and inspired. Even if nothing would take place in the month they're there, this idea of just seeing art and being in that environment, we thought it would be indeed enough. So the program was intended to allow those artists to be nurtured and to just create a space for them to reflect on the experience. So when they go back to Yemen, maybe there's that button of refresh. They can feel inspired and create something new. And what was happening also is most of the time, whenever those programs, whether they're exhibitions or mentorship or training are taking place, they're often funded by international NGOs, humanitarian agencies, foreign embassies, and they're often organized and run by foreigners who their understanding of Yemen and the contemporary art practices and the creative community happens to be very limited. So what was really important for us is those are programs and projects that are for us, but they're also created by us. And it's true the language was often in English, but between us we understood the struggle, we knew what was needed. Even at the time, to get a Yemeni national to leave the country, it would take up to 3 weeks. They would have to travel by land for 13 hours to reach the nearest airport, and then they would get to a country like Jordan where they spent 2 weeks waiting for their visas. So in order for those artists to make it to Berlin, which prior to the war was a direct flight from Sana'a to Frankfurt, and it was something like 7 hours, it would take them up to 3 weeks. But we wanted to just continue and push forward and started to think, what is next that can be done? How can we further support the artists? So we were lucky to create a project called On Echoes of Invisible Hearts. And it came in 2 chapters. The first chapter was in Berlin in 2018. The second chapter was in Beirut in 2019. The first chapter in Berlin, On Echoes of Invisible Hearts, Narrative of Yemeni Displacement, it was a group exhibition that featured artists in Yemen and the diaspora whose work explores themes of loss and estrangement. And it was one of the first times that we are in this Western city and we're showing work of Yemeni artists, but again, the curation and the production of the show is made by locals. It's quite unfortunate that often, whenever there was an exhibition of contemporary artists from Yemen, what you're seeing is those who are in charge of it or running it, they're not really coming with background in art, but they're often from this diplomatic background, and there's the emphasis of telling a local narrative was always missing. So this was a great start for us. We created this dialogue of East meet West, which I personally don't use anymore. The following year, we went to Beirut, and there was another focus on this second chapter on image making and popular archiving in times of unrest. So we looked at how the media is covering the war in Yemen, and we asked the artists, how would you want to cover it? There's this mystify and glorifying notion, and there were questions that were being asked. And what was really exciting about this time around is the featured artists got to show their work in another Arab country. So instead of the East meet West, we were able to have a dialogue between Arab artists, a country like Yemen and a country like Lebanon, where there is this understanding of war, trauma, and conflict. The wall has already been taken down. You don't have to explain how you live in times of war. And this was such an exciting experience for us to just be able to bring some of the artists and have this dialogue on what work do you want to produce and do you continue to make in times of war? What happens if the work you produce is not reflective of the environment that you're living in, and do you give yourself the freedom to create? And with that, we were able to, with those 2 projects, we created catalogs. It was the first time that we are working with this notion of booklets, where the work that was featured in both exhibitions was there. You can take it home and keep it. The exhibition took place in both cities, and it ended, and it was forgotten. But the catalogs of the artist's works stayed with them. I just want to do a quick preview of some of those catalogs. So the one that we're looking at now, the blue one, is the second chapter, which took place in Beirut. And it was heavy on text to discuss media and reflections, not just from the curator, who was Middle Eastern, but also from the artists. And the other one you see on the other side was the first one from Berlin. And I think in the back of my mind, personally, I remembered that even after I left and went back to Yemen, it was this idea of the catalog stayed. And we can talk about the project without the notion of sending a press pack or sending images or files. It was, here's this, here's a copy, keep it with you. And then there's this crazy idea that happened while I was living in Berlin. It's like, well, things are really exciting for me. Maybe I should move to Yemen in the midst of the war and start an art foundation. But then again, if you work in the art world, there's always that level of delusion, and you just follow your heart. And indeed I went, at least by myself, and I noticed that the community that I had while I was living in Yemen before the war is all gone. The artists left, or some of them stopped making art. So there was this idea of, we need to start from zero, and how to build a community. Well, we need to find it. So every project and activity we would do, it was based on open calls. Whether it's a small project where we're just going to go for a photo walk with emerging photographers, or it was a large-scale project, everything was based on open calls, because we were able to build that database and discover new talent, not necessarily in just image photography and video medium, but also in all other mediums, including creative writing. And some of the works that we would do is try to do a feature on artists who are thriving, in a sense, and filmmakers. You know, here we can talk about, oh, I'm inspired by this artist's work here and there, and there's a notion of casuality about it. But when you're in a conflict zone and you see an artist who's producing and being celebrated, it really has heavy emphasis. So those younger artists, when they're seeing someone who comes from their own country, speak their own language, and they're thriving, and they are in large-scale exhibitions globally, and they're in film festivals, there is this light of hope that, okay, I can produce the same, I can be the same, I can create my own path. But also we noticed that, in a way, because of the war and the conflict, there was a lot of fear for artists to hold their cameras and be out in the streets. It became a space where, unfortunately, the city, in particular in Sana'a, to hold a gun and walk with it proudly will be less of a hassle than to hold a camera and just walk around with it and take photographs. So we were shifting gears a bit and try to focus on literature, and there was a lot of interest in young talent who would want the support. Those are some of our literature gatherings. They're called jalasat, which in Arabic is a word for to sit together and to just be together. And it was very modest monthly gatherings where young writers would meet and sit. But what would happen through those is the conversations would go from literature to visual art, because what happens is, when you're an artist or a writer in a war conflict zone, you start create those small communities. And through writers, we were able to find and learn about photographers and filmmakers and aspiring musicians. So we created our own circle of, it really was kind of like a bubble of, the war was outside those spaces. The war was outside those cafes and art spaces. We always needed permission to host those events, even if they're small gatherings. So you learn how to find a way to just have them in the hush-hush, in a way, quietly, without creating a fuzz, to just avoid the backlash. But also, a lot of what we did in Yemen is try to focus on mentoring opportunities and training opportunities. This is a 2-week workshop that we did with 11 aspiring writers who had their work published in a book. We decided to call it Conflict, and in Arabic means Sara, and it was about the new literature in Yemen. We noticed that artists, writers, their work wasn't much reflective of the war that was taking place at that very moment, but it was a conflict within their own selves, their identities. And based on that, we decided to name the book Conflict. I want to quickly go through this project called eJournal on digitizing Yemeni culture journals. It's a project we did in Yemen where we worked with the National Library to digitize only the culture journals that existed there. The location of the National Library is a very intense location in the heart of the capital, and it's very close to many governmental buildings, which means the library was not safe from those ongoing airstrikes. In addition, there's no maintenance. There's no funding for any maintenance. This was the basement and the archive space, one of the archive space where some journals that are hundreds of years old are there and not being maintained for lack of funding and lack of resources. We went in and with the hope to digitize culture journals who will be, from the 60s, and we got our hands on journals from as early as 1930. And it was scary but enriching and exciting. all right, what if we're in 1 year we were able to digitize over 1,000 culture journal, and we were a very small team. This was just 2 individuals who were doing the work with small, modest funding. We were able to find those scanning machines and start working through it. And the goal is for researchers and artists to be able to look back and find inspiration within our own culture, our own history. Another element that once the year ended, we were able to donate some of those digitizing machines to the libraries in hope for them to carry on. But unfortunately, due to lack of electricity and power cuts, this never continued. But for now, those journals, they live in a hard drive with us and also the library. And we're always hoping for, something one day to come and we're able to do something with it. Well, now that we're in the art book world, we have ideas of where to go from here. Another project we did was a report or a paper called Conversations, where we gathered 15 art practitioners and artists and filmmakers together in a space to just talk about art. Often those reports are done by humanitarian and nonprofit organizations for them to be able to send it back and get more funding. But there were always those political angles. There were always angles of we need more funding to do this and this. But we wanted to do things differently. And again, it was just us locals speaking with one another, creating a safe space to just talk about what are the challenges we're facing as artists living inside the country. What are the challenges we're facing as artists who are living in the diaspora? How can our challenges make us learn from one another? We were able to publish this report. Email me, I'll leave my contact information if you'd like this report. It used to live on our website, but now our website has been down for a few years, like the foundation, since the foundation paused its operation, but I'm happy to send it. And while living in Yemen, we also started a gallery. One more thing to add, archive is a word in Arabic which means archive. We wanted to create a space where artists can exhibit their work and be able to sell it. So it was an art space. It was a very, very small art space, and it was open for public. But the idea is to make an appointment. And we thought it would be really difficult. Why would someone in a place like Yemen, a very undeveloped country, in the midst of the war, want to make an appointment? But we were proven wrong by the minute we announced our gallery's opening with our first show. People were messaging us, getting on DM, sending emails, and say, when I would like to make an appointment, I want to see this show. They heard about it somewhere, one of their friends is part of it. And our first show was called Turning the Light On. We wanted to turn the light on contemporary art practices. It was a photography show, was very modestly printed, but what mattered is to have the work of those artists in the wall and to have a press release there when you come in and you read it and try to understand the work, understand the space and how we operate. We followed the few months later with a solo presentation by an artist who's a sculpture maker, Afrah Ahmed, and we titled the show When the Moon Fell from the Sky, It Broke. It's reflective of the architecture of Yemen, but also in times of war and conflict. And we were really happy about it. There was a really exciting program. We started thinking about other Arab artists that we might not be able to bring them to the country, but we're able to bring their work. So conversations started taking place. The following month by another photographer artist, Abir Arif, Would You Count My Pain Through Though If I Shed No Tears? And she looks at the damage that is within the city as a result of the war, and is photographing spaces as she walks from her home to the university. February 2020, this is a really rough date because COVID news are in the air and we're not sure what to do. So we paused for a while. We paused for quite a while. I happened to be, when the war erupted, I was stranded in Berlin. Right after doing a residency, COVID erupts, and I happened to be stranded again in Berlin while doing another art residency. Since then, I don't do activities in Berlin. I just visit. We come back again in September, but this time it's just an online show on Instagram. Tell Me About Your Anxiety, where we bring 3 male artists to reflect on this notion of vulnerability within the Arab man. An exciting show, and we bring the work of the artists, but we don't have the space. We're all doing it online, and we're thinking back to this idea of, if there's no physical space, sometimes the internet is not enough. What can we do? So we go back to the catalogs that we had, the one we produced a few years ago from the exhibitions in Berlin and Beirut, and we take a pause and we start working, and we come back with this. In August of 2024, less than a year ago, we debuted Photography from Yemen. It is a survey on contemporary photography from Yemen. It has the work of 14 artists living inside Yemen and the diaspora, and it's the first survey of its kind. At that point, I'm living in New York, I'm settled in New York, and I'm thinking, this will be a lovely project. This is a slow burn. This will take maybe, we made for the first edition 500. Thought maybe this will take 2 to 3 years, and then we can make a second edition. And proven wrong again, within 7 months or less, we were sold out of the first edition. It has traveled, and it is available in 10 different countries around the world. And there was so much excitement about what this book is about. And until now, I don't know what it is. Is it because of the beauty of the cover? Is it because of there's nothing like it before? Is it because it brings a different narrative on Yemen? It's made by locals, and we made sure that the artist gets to select what is the work that is in the book. We made sure that their names are highlighted in the back of the book, and we started going to book art fairs, which became a crazy new experience for me as someone who has never done this before. The very first art book fair is the Brooklyn Book Art Fair that we did in September, and started to meet people and just to see how they're gravitating towards the work we're doing. I added this one this morning, now that we're here. And there's always the first and the last one to be highlighted is Photography from Yemen. I took this photo yesterday. This is our current table. As a press that was only started in August, to just be here, and be here not just as an exhibitor, but also we are the recipient of the Michael Caine Award, the Shannon Michael Caine Award, and we're here with Photography from Yemen, but we're bringing the second edition because first edition sold out. So a lot is happening for us at once, and we're thinking what to do. Our table has the work of number of Arab photographers from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Tunisia, from Bahrain, from Sudan, and we're creating those partnerships with those artists who are unable to come to art book fairs. But we're also really interested in what happens if we avoid this notion of East meet West? What happens if there's a global Southern Hemisphere? Let's bring the work of artists from Latin America. Let's bring the work from artists from Asia and create this space to just for the photo books to have a conversation on their own. And then I thought about myself again, and I thought, what's next? So I made this book, and it's debuting at the fair, and it's Makan's second title, and it's kind of a reminder for me to not forget about myself in the process. And Taipei, it's just a walk in Taipei, a city that I've always loved, a city in an island that is actually indeed facing a conflict in its own way. But I reflect on my own experience in Yemen, and this notion of I can't hold a camera and I walk in my own city, but I'm able to hold a camera and I walk in a different city. I invite you to come to the table and take a look and browse through. Photography has been my life and my world, and I'm always thinking about the magic of photography, whether it's a photo taken by a 4x5 large format analog camera or it's an iPhone photo, and I'm always coming back to this photo. This is an analog. This is a paper that was made for a darkroom photography paper that expired in the early 20s, and when I put it in the developer, when I put that dark part in the developer, it goes entirely black, but there's those dots that look like stars. And this part in the right is the part that does not get exposed into the developer. And I think a lot about the magic of photography. And this is how it looks just on its own. And I'm always going back to this, and I think, yeah, what a special thing for me to be a photographer. And whether I'm working with artists who are living in conflict and war zones, or whether I'm working with my friend artists who are producing zines, and I'm able to bring their zines here to LA, and I'm taking it to the Emirates when I'm in an art book fair there, and I'm trying to just stay in that state of mind and this beauty at the end of it, of those photographs. And that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. And thank you so much for listening. That's it. Thank you. I'm happy to talk or take any questions. I did so good on the time. I'm under 30 minutes, exactly how I wanted it. But yes, I'm happy to converse, or as we look together at this presentation by not me. Otherwise, yes. Thank you. Before I forget, there's also a book we have called Landing, and it's on skating culture in Palestine. You must come and take a look at skating culture, yeah, it's in Palestine, called Landing. So I think I'm really fortunate because I wasn't raised in the West. I was raised in the Arab world. So I think that already helps a lot. But I really recall when I was in my early 20s and coming here and feeling the pressure of creating this East meet West dialogue. I don't know if I should call it a dialogue or like state of mind. Let's call it that. And I think it's just learning from experience and always listening to my friends who are living in Yemen when I was living in the West. Listening to them helped me a lot and reminded me of where I came from and this idea of I don't need to do this. But what I'm noticing now, that it becomes a responsibility on my own to reflect that with my friends who are raised here, who for some reason always say, I'm so jealous of you, you were raised in Yemen. Like, there's nothing to be jealous about, but I completely relate to that narrative and that state of mind. But I think the only way to navigate it is by pushing our own dialogue further, you know? This idea of bringing work of Latin American photographers, having it in the same table where there is did I say Latin American, Latin photographers, in the same table with our work by Arab photographers, and really exploring through imagery, you're able to explore the commonalities. You're seeing the struggle, you're seeing the beauty, and it's all coming together. And I think that's what I'm constantly reminding myself. Okay, need to push this further more. In one of the art fairs I participated in, there was this man who came in, and nothing poorly to say about him, but he started looking through photography from Yemen, and then he paused and he said, I am shocked, I am surprised. And I said, tell me more. And he said, I'm not seeing any of the beautiful, like Arabia Felix, beautiful landscape, mountainous Yemen that I'm used to see in other photography books. I have all those books. I have a personal collection of endless photography books on Yemen that were made by white male photographers throughout the past 30 years. I collect them, and I think they're important, but I also have them to remember that lens and how it looks like. I think that was the best compliment I've ever received on my work, because the reality of Yemen today is not beautiful landscape and gorgeous architecture and those little beautiful kids that you're going to a little village to photograph. it's war and it's trauma, but it's also perseverance that we're able to examine through the lens of those photographers. So I think that I'm always reminded of that, and I'm constantly keeping the push forward of like, okay, what's next? How to have less and less interest in this East-West dialogue, if we want to call it so. I hope this answered the question, but yeah, please make sure to look at Landing. It is gorgeous. Yeah, my pleasure. Any comment, question, any reflection?
What What do you like about Taiwan?
Oh,
I'm Taiwanese.
oh my
so
God,
I'm
this
curious.
changes everything. Okay, so I made this book for so many reasons, but I have loved Taipei in particular because of Edward Yang. I need the mic, right? For if yeah, Edward Yang. Edward Yang is just Edward Yang is for will always be my happy place. He's passed away. He was a legendary Taiwanese filmmaker, part of Taiwanese New Wave, and he's made some incredible films. Some of them you must know: Yi Yi, Y-I, which is always considered to be one of the best films made in the 20th century. For me, it was Taipei Story, a film he made. And in his work, the protagonist is always Taipei. It's always the city. And I've learned about his work for a while, and always been in the back of my mind. But I fell in love with a Taiwanese person, so that changed a lot. But I remember that when it was time for me to go to Taipei, I wanted to go there alone. I was really afraid if I go with this person, I will see the city through their eyes, and I really needed to see it. I really felt I owe it to Edward Yang. In a crazy mindset, I thought I must go there. I will go alone. So I quit my job and I went for a month. And in order for no one to tell me what are you doing, I signed up for an intensive Mandarin language class. So I would wake up early in the morning and go and photograph and walk around and then go to my classes, and then I spend the next 8 hours of the day eating. Eating in Taipei is a national sport. It's just like it's something I don't know how to explain. But there was no intention on making the book, to be honest. I really did not think about it as a book. I just thought Taipei is a place I'll keep going back to. And indeed, I went back to the second time with my partner. This time I'm like, sure, I can see it through your eyes, but I will always hold on to that first trip by myself, 30 days. But I think I began printing some of those photographs, and people started looking at them, and friends started looking at them, and then Taiwanese friends started looking at them. And I just remember some of my friends being like, like those are really ugly corners. How do you make them look beautiful? And I just think, how dare you say this? But then I thought, my work as an artist, it's about conflict. As a photographer, it's about gender and sexuality and identity in Muslim conservative societies. And as I grew up, I now work in the dark room. I don't even work with negatives. I work with expired paper. And I just thought to myself, if I were to make my first monograph, what would it be and how it would look like? And it just hit me. It's like, what if it's just like my time in Taipei? What if it's a book of the happiest period I've ever remembered, for as far as I'm concerned? So I made Taipei. I made the book, and it's just a walk. And at the start of it, I talk a little bit about Edward Yang and Taipei and the city, and yeah, and it's been exciting because every time we participate in an art book fair, the prints in the back, they have photos from the book, because for the past few months we've been kind of teasing the book, and the book just came out yesterday. And I love when someone approaches and they look, and there's that look, and I know that person is Taiwanese. It just makes me feel a little bit happy. But then I'm always asking myself, but then again, like, who am I, and what gives me the right to make a book about a country that is not my own? I bet you, like those Western photographers, never asked that question when they came to our countries. But I guess it helps to be, it helps to have a Taiwanese partner. I hope that answered the question.
No, I was just very curious.
Yeah. It makes me so happy to talk about Taipei. It changes gears, but yeah, that's it. Someone told me about a great Taiwanese restaurant here. I don't know if I'll have the time to see it, but yeah. My pleasure. Yes, please. This time I think you need the mic.
All right, so like you mentioned that there's a lot of Western photographers that would come to the Middle East and photograph what they wanted to see, what they wanted to portray, and I guess for lack of a better word, like orientalizing the Middle East. Have you ever struggled with like, oh, like I need to show this side of Yemen or like this side of like what it means to be Arab, and like I want to show the beauty, but I also want to show that like the reality of it all without like, did you ever like struggle with like looking at it through a Western lens at all?
Yes. Okay, and I actually have photo evidence for my response. Um, I want to talk about this artist. Her name is Iman Al-Awami, and please pardon me. I'll point out. I actually can do it with them. Let's look right over here. Let's look right over here. Let's look here, and I'll explain to you what we're looking at. Right over here, those are photographs that Iman was commissioned by international nonprofit agencies, humanitarian agencies, to go on those trips to small towns and photograph people who are in poor conditions. Their photograph images are being used for those organizations to acquire more funding, which is perfectly right. But the artist made this project because she would always not want to take those photographs. She really didn't want to take those photographs, and she would create this kind of argument of, but there's also more to photograph. Why don't you share with your donors both narratives? And the answer was always no. So she went on and photographed other individuals, and we had them highlighted here, that she thought, yes, they live in a really difficult condition and they have their own challenges, but they're doing fine with their life. They're able to help themselves. The help they need is not in food, but maybe what they need is actual financial support to start their creative projects and go on from there. And I think this is a really good example, is especially when you're an artist and you need those jobs and you need those opportunities. Unfortunately, you have to follow the guides of what you're being asked to do. But I think there should always be a space where you can create your own story and tell your own story. For me, I'm kind of crazy in my head, so I'll just do what I want, and I reached a point where I will just not take the funding from certain agencies. I will just not accept it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much it is. I'm just not interested in it. Do I go and stop other fellow artist friends from doing the same? No, because I know the importance of it. But it's very important for me to have this conversation with them, so they are aware. They know what's happening. And if there is a way in the hush-hush for them to bring in their own narrative, then so be it. But I think what's really important from the big picture is for us to be, especially those who are outside, to be vocal about what's happening. I would like to. I keep keep telling people, look at Landing, look at Man's work. When I say skating culture in Palestine, I'm always getting this. Like, what did you say? Because of my accent, they're like making sure you said it right. I'm like, yes, skating culture in Palestine, skaters. Look at the book. So I'm keeping this in mind. I probably. Yemen is difficult to access now. Socotra, this beautiful island in the south of Yemen, it's not. Many photographers are able to go there, and they're taking those photographs and they're making books out of it. I can't stop them, but what I can do is I can keep making books like this, and I can advise people to just put more investment in projects like this, and try to push it further. It's less than a year that we made this, and we're already in the second edition. I keep going back to my friend who told me, oh, making books is lovely and it's a slow burn. And I do think it is, but maybe not for projects like this. And I'm really happy that it's not a slow burn. So I'm staying in this state of mind of, there was so much interest on this survey on photography from Yemen. Would there be interest on a survey on photography from Venezuela, another conflict zone? I don't have so much knowledge on the contemporary art practices, and I'm just using Venezuela as an example, but I'm sure someone who has the same knowledge on art practices from Yemen, like me, would have it on Venezuela. I need to go on a hunt and find that person, so together we can create a survey similar like this. So we're doing our job of changing the narrative on how people look at a place like Venezuela. I keep using Venezuela as an example, but my good friend is Venezuelan, so it's good. Um, yeah, I think so. Go ahead, ask away.
So you mentioned that there were a few photographers like you left Yemen and then you went back and you were trying to start a foundation again, or like a collective, I guess, of artists, but some of them stopped working on your art, some of them, yeah, but in summary, they just stopped working on your art. Um, was there any particular reason about the war that discouraged them? And you personally, did you ever go through that, like through a wave of like I can't make any art? And kind of how did you get yourself out of this? Because I feel like I'm in the same boat right now.
Do you live in LA?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sunny. Come on, like. So here's the sad reality: is in a place like Yemen, they could stop because of harassments. You make art and you want to share it with the world. There are no spaces, and when there is, you have to be really, really cautious of what you're presenting and what you're discussing in your work. Lots of my friends, male or female, they were harassed in the streets because of holding cameras. Digital cameras that they have used are expensive. So for someone to take away this camera that you like, it makes you so happy, and you no longer have it. I think that's a reason enough for you to quit. And also, the people are not making money from it, from this world anymore. So it's hard, but I learned how to not question it or ask questions or even encourage. But in a way, what I like is to be present when that person is ready. And I have experienced this with friends who were very active. The war erupted, they stopped, and then you slowly see them coming back, and that's a good point to come and help. I love to work with my friends. That's my favorite thing. In the table, a lot of the artists are actually my friends who are making books and making zines, and um, it just makes it all the more fun. But I think like I think it just has to come from within, and if it stops, it means maybe you don't want to do it. But in your case, don't do it. Don't stop. I'll talk to you. We'll talk there. I'll show you all the books. You'll be ready to make books by tomorrow. But Yemen is a different case because I'm very fortunate to be living here and can just wake up in New York and make work. So I could understand when someone is living in such challenging environment and decides, okay, I can't do it anymore. But you don't really, really know because many friends of mine are actually constantly producing, but they're not showing it. And I think that's the beauty in it, that you have that power and perseverance to keep creating, but you know that showing it, exhibiting it is not safe or there's no space, but you're still keeping that feeling from within. I'm producing, I'm making it, therefore I exist as an artist. Yeah.